Thank you, Greg. I do go running occasionally, but this is about procurement. Most of my time in New Zealand has been administrative education. 7 years in infrastructure, so most of what I'm talking around is kind of property-related procurement. The last 6 months or so in the CPO, but this is all really about the infrastructure work. There's a lot of procurement people here. How many procurement people? Hands up. How many property people? Okay. And how many both? Okay. So, sorry to the procurement people that may have seen some of this before and find it a little bit like teaching you to suck eggs. And hopefully for the property people, there's some stuff in here you can take back and smack around the head of your procurement people and tell them what they might do to do a little bit better. The idea is that there will be some nuggets, hopefully, that's of use to all of you. I'm not suggesting by any means that what I'm talking about will work for everyone, but there's probably some bits and pieces that will be useful. I've got 25 minutes, and this is a 50-minute presentation, so I'm going to skip over some slides, but there is some time at the end for questions. So if you want to ask me any questions, just wait to the end and dive in. So this morning, I'm going to talk a little bit about education infrastructure service groups. That's a bit of the Ministry of Education I've predominantly been working in. Our operating context, but that's really about, I suppose, the procurement context, the market we're working in, some of the challenges we've got, and what we did around how we might work better with that market, be a better client, get a little bit more value as well. And the specifics, I suppose, then are this construction directory idea, which is really just a panel, but I'll talk a little bit more about that. What we did around our forward pipeline, some stuff we're doing now and planning to do over the next year or so around financial due diligence. And not really the construction accord, but I'll touch on it very briefly. Is someone what you're not doing that before they outlines? Okay. And I'm not going to probably get much time to talk about what's ahead in 2020, but it's going to be a brilliant year. So, education infrastructure service. Who's heard of EIS? Okay, a few people. Okay, I thought you know really. So, education infrastructure service is a little group within the Ministry of Education. When I started, it was really a little group. It was just some policy people and some financiers that basically wrote some policy around funding to schools and how they got money to look after their property. So the Ministry of Education owns all property across New Zealand. The estate is ours. But in effect, Boards of Trustees are tenants there. We have a tenancy agreement and they must maintain and look after that property. We give them the money and away they go. So lots of people here have probably been on Boards of Trustees or understand. For me, it was a slightly alien concept, but quite interesting. But it comes with some challenges, which I'll talk about in a sec. It was a small group, so 2011-12, when I came, there were 30, 40 of us. Now there's nearly 600. I suppose that's really just an indication of the shift from centralisation to decentralisation. At the moment, we're doing a lot more ourselves as opposed to fully distributed a few years ago. But there are some big numbers. So where's property down at the bottom? The book value of the estate is nearly $20 billion. 906 million was our capital expenditure last financial year. What's that? Yeah, 15,000 buildings, 35,000 teaching spaces. So it's pretty significant and obviously completely distributed across New Zealand. So you've got single teacher principal school, which might only have half a dozen kids on the west coast, 2 hours from the nearest Sparky that might even think about doing any work for us, to Rangatahi College with 2,500 kids in the middle of Auckland and a whole commercial business team. So hugely different organisations. So my boss, Kim, was looking after school property back in 2011-12, started doing a good job of it. So then the Secretary of Education at the time said, oh, Kim, would you mind looking after school transport? So we then took over $200 million of getting kids to school and back on buses every day. So watch the media this year for the fun around tendering that. And then also NovaPay happened, and Kim was the kind of only person who didn't have both hands in the air. So when NovaPay happened and Education Payroll Limited got set up as a Crown agency, we got the pleasure of looking after and managing the relationship and the outcomes of education payroll. So we look after 3 big portfolios, I guess. We also put ultra-fast broadband and wireless into every single school in New Zealand over the last 10 years, which was the backbone to New Zealand's broadband infrastructure, I guess. So, a little bit of context. What does that mean in terms of numbers? We're 16% of some cut-out, caveated number, but the non-residential building construction sector. So, basically, non-residential vertical construction was 16%, so relatively significant. The big scary bit for me was, 1,100 GET tenders in 2019, 306 tenders from us, so the Ministry of Education, but another 800 being led by schools. So that's where we're giving schools money and they're off building a new classroom, putting a new roof in. It's not fully my responsibility or our responsibility, but it's our money and it's our estate, it's our property, so we're doing everything we can to motivate them to get the best possible outcomes from that and spend that money in the best way. As you'd expect, with 900 million going out the door, a lot of suppliers, and a lot of GETS opportunities that we're trying to make sure are both compliant and ticking the boxes, but also getting good outcomes and doing a good job. That statistic, that little bubble amazes me. $2,500 every minute we're spending, just terrifying. This session, what does that equal? $75,000 in half an hour. Right, so when I came, there was no procurement team. It was fully distributed. Basically, there were some people in the business doing a little bit, but largely it was project managers acting on behalf, or project managers really acting on behalf of boards of trustees. So boards of trustees got a bit of work to do, then engage an external PM. That PM then writes the RFP, the tender docs, the spec, the scope goes out for an architect and designer and a builder and manages the process. So hugely distributed. And with that, with thousands of projects happening every year, managed by either great or not so great externals, you get real variation in quality. So you've got pockets of great practice, pockets of terrible practice, and everything in between. As you guys will all know, or those involved in property, we've got a pretty tough market at the moment. You can't get hold of a subby for money in most places. When you're distributed across the whole country, that becomes even more difficult. When you're not necessarily paying top dollar, it becomes really, really quite difficult. We don't have a particularly mature construction market or strong construction market, so the core stuff that we're not going to talk about too much is taking some steps to turn that around, and I think procurement has a big part to play in that. But we've seen quite a few companies that should not fail just because it's not really the ethos of construction markets to have good working capital and to be looking long term into the future of their companies. They're more thinking about their batch, their boat, and retiring pretty soon and folding their company if something goes wrong. So the due diligence stuff I'll talk about in a minute, about how we're trying to counter some of that. We're not seen as a client of choice, so when I came, we were in a pretty full-on litigation campaign. So we had, I can't remember what the numbers were, 600 to 900 leaky classrooms across the country. And rather than rolling over and saying that was just a bad thing, we did something about it, and we went after architects and builders. And I still think it was the right thing to do. We're holding the industry to account, but it did make it quite hard for us to be seen as a client of choice when on my left hand I'm sending you a legal letter saying what's the even court, on my right hand I'm sending you 900 tenders saying please will you bid. So that's the weather time and stuff there. We didn't do anything really, or nothing from the centre around supplier relationships, so we weren't talking to our suppliers. So we're dealing with the same suppliers time and time again. Normal story, 80% of our spend was probably with a dozen suppliers. And yeah, we didn't have strategic relationships with those. We weren't meeting them on a quarterly basis. The MD wasn't on speed dial to me to say, hey Sunshine, what's going on here? So that's stuff that we've been working on for the last little bit. We didn't publish a pipeline, so no one knew what was coming. It was always just hey, it's on GETS, away we go. And schools have quite tough expectations. So they all want more money, they all want the shiniest thing possible, they're all in competition with each other, and there's not enough money ever to go around. Right, so what we tried to do, so we launched the construction directory before pipeline. Okay, so we'll talk about that one in a little bit. That's probably the crux of this morning. A few other things that we've been doing. We've done a lot to communicate with suppliers, so we now, on a quarterly or 4-monthly basis, we'll go around the regions and just spend time with not just our key suppliers, but all of our suppliers. So we'll have open forums, town halls, and just say this is what we're planning to do, like NZTA does. This is our forward pipeline, this is the work that's coming up in this region. everything above $500,000 projects. So admittedly, it's not everything, but this is what's happening. This is our plan of attack. This is potential opportunities for you, and then we generally will have a sit down and make ourselves available for a sit down afterwards as well. So we'll do a bit of a show and tell, and then have 30-minute sessions with our suppliers and say, okay, what do you think of that? What's working for you? What isn't working for you? How might we improve? What are the things that are really awful? So we get much more valuable kind of feedback in those conversations as well. Yeah, greater emphasis on public value rather than lowest cost. So that's probably presentation 2.0 of this, what we're doing around Accord and trying to get longer term relationships with our suppliers in the markets, allowing them to see the investment pipeline so they can invest in themselves and their people rather than 1,000 individual contracts and projects. One of the first things that I did, and it wasn't my idea, but it was a bloody good idea, was set up MOUs with the New Zealand Institute of Architects and the ASENS, the Association of Engineers. So we basically had pretty tense relationships, certainly with the architects and to a degree with the engineers. So 2014-15, we met with them and said, look guys, it's not great, but we need to work on this together. We put a piece of paper together that said we'd meet on a quarterly basis, and the intent was collaboration, communication, work together. First point was to ring each other rather than go to the media or every one of our members. Didn't always work, but it's certainly over 5 years has turned around a lot. Tina from New Zealand Institute of Architects wrote to Peter Hughes a couple of years ago, said this is working, so rather than writing to the minister and saying Lawrence was an asshole, I was pretty pissed about that. Sorry, Peter. And I'd recommend that with anyone. So if you have lobby groups or anyone that is difficult, get in a room, sit down with them. Not necessarily the MOU, you don't need to formalise it, but actually formalising it was kind of useful. They all went back, they went to their members and said, look at what we're doing here, we're hearing you, we know the ministry is difficult, you're all getting sued by them, we're opening up the doors to communication, their terms and conditions and their insurance clauses or their liability clauses, we're having that conversation, so I would recommend it. Our integration with delivery, so for those that are in property teams as opposed to procurement teams, we're co-located, we sit within our property teams, so there's 26 or so people in my capital works procurement team. They sit on the same floor, i.e. in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch, as our delivery teams are doing the work as well. And it is genuinely quite a symbiotic relationship. They are kind of working together. That's not to say it's perfect and there's not friction. There's always issues around roles and responsibilities and accountabilities that we're always trying to improve, but it's a lot better than firing off procurement and sit and wait and throw stones at them until they get a tender back or a contract back. And we're committed to an annual fresher construction contract. So a lot of the noise, a lot of the things that get, I suppose, get easy headlines and easy attention are around liabilities, insurance levels, those kind of really obvious things. So, and our contracts are a big part of that. So we open the door constantly to having a conversation about our T's and C's. Pretty much on an annual basis, we'll review our 391 clauses or 391X clauses, and they've generally swung back a lot more in favour of the markets. They are considerably softer now. And I think we can do that because we've got the relationships now with suppliers, so we can manage risk a little bit better rather than being, we don't know what's going on, and we better belt and braces protect ourselves. Okay. So this idea of a construction directory, I don't like to say this, but really it's just a panel. It's just a panel of contractors that we set up. Having created a few panels in my time though, I was quite loath to just create another panel that had hundreds of suppliers on it that most of them didn't get any business. But we had to do something to try and streamline the process. We were putting out 1,100 tenders a year. So everything over $500,000 we now put through this construction directory. We open it up to all primary construction contractors, no limit on the number of appointments. So it's basically a big open panel, much like in all of government, I guess, the consultancy or something like that. The things that are different, I suppose, are the performance management framework, which I'll touch on. So the way that we motivate better performance from suppliers to inform their likelihood of getting work in the future. And also, I guess the proactivity around making sure we've got the right supplies in the right places. So we've done a lot of work where we haven't got small demolition contracts in the West Coast or in Gisborne or Taranaki. Then we'll go up there, we'll do a targeted campaign, and we'll have a forum, and we'll say, we want these people to come on, we've got a gap in our direction, we need people to fill this gap. So, what have I got next? Engaging the market. Oh, so yeah, this just goes back to this idea of engaging the market. So we had this idea, this straw man of setting up this construction directory, this panel, and we wanted to test it, I guess, with our suppliers. So we went out in 2017, which was the first time we went out to the market, just to 5 main centres, did our straw man presentation, town halls, had our one-to-ones afterwards, 33 hours of feedback, 200 individuals, 87 construction suppliers. It was a pain in the ass, but it was fantastic. It was the most valuable thing probably that we've done in quite a lot of years. Because we were able to test our ideas, we were able to refine our thinking before we went to the market. Suppliers knew what was coming, they'd all had an opportunity to put their ideas into the mix. And actually, so this is the kind of feedback from those highly positive, do it now. Yeah, stop asking the same questions in each new project with positive ROIs. So that's what we were doing. You know, we were going out with 1,100 ROIs saying we want a tender for 2 new classrooms, same questions to the same suppliers all the time and time again. So this basically just killed the ROI process. We knew who we had, we knew what their capacity and capability was, and we were able to down select 2 or 3 and ask them to just tender. Keep the panel open, so those that have been involved in closed panels would probably agree that that's generally a good idea. And when we didn't, we knew that we weren't going to get everybody we wanted in the first round, so let's keep rolling through and give people an opportunity to come in at a later date. If they're a bit cynical and they're standoffish, the next time they have to wait 3-5 years to come back on again. Do provide a forward program, so that's a big bit of feedback really was, tell us what's coming up. We've got bid teams, we've got teams ready to go, but they're not available at 10 days notice to write a tender response in 20 days. We need to know what's coming up. And actually, where possible, I think it comes up in a second, sequence work. So whether it's horizontal sequences of projects, so go from this project to this project to this project with your team, so we get some efficiencies that way, or vertical bundling of projects. So put 5 small projects in, we did a lot in Taranaki where we had a big anchor project, and then we had some little jobs around it. We put them all out together to make it attractive so that we get decent contracts to do this one, but he also picks up the 5 little jobs at the same time. So they were really keen on that vertical and horizontal bundling. Yeah, don't go to too many suppliers. They were really happy to compete. It was interesting actually. There was a lot of egos, and they were like, we're happy to tender. We know we'll win. But what I don't want is to be tendering against 10 people. So if it's 3 or 4, I'm all in, and I'll win. So we restricted our secondary selections a bit, or our tendering exercise to just 3 or 4 suppliers. And then some technical stuff just in our T's and C's, different pressures of bonding. So those of you that have got work program, multiple kind of projects of work happening consistently, rather than asking for a bond on each one of those, look at program bonds or organizational bonds rather than project bonds. Really, always everybody wants to review warranty requirements and provisions. Streamlining police vetting. Who is involved in police vetting? Probably quite a few of us. So it's a painful thing, going onto a school site. How do we make sure that everybody going on has ticked the boxes in terms of police vetting? So we came up with a process around site restrictions and limiting the areas that they could get to so they didn't have to have so much chaperone.
Well, you got it there on not setting the hurdle too low. So how did you strike a balance there?
Yeah, look, and that was a real tough one. Did we do it really well? We probably did set it kind of low, but we used the secondary competition to just go to the ones that are at the top range. So we might bring 3 that are kind of much more capable, and then we'll bring 1 in as an opportunity to test that way. Because we did keep the hurdle relatively low in the end. Because we ended up with 100 suppliers, you've now got 140 on this. The difference between a south-based response and a 2-man guy in wherever is so different, and we needed the 2-man guy in wherever so that we could actually get that work done. Any more questions before I move on? We haven't got time. So this is what we did. We ran a process. I'm not going to go into this too much. We've now been around the loop twice. So this year, or rather last year, middle of last year, we went around again, filled in those gaps. We went to 14 centres around, not 14 towns across the country. And it was all targeted around where our gaps were to try and fill those gaps. So we put an extra 40 suppliers in there. We changed our terms and conditions last year. And performance management got built in, and that was in there already. I think that's the next slide. So this is an interesting thing that I wanted to touch on with everybody. And look, this is hard for the procurement people. I'm happy to talk about it, but if you can help me refine it, that'd be good. But the fundamental idea is performance-based supply. So if you're a contractor, you're successful on a couple of projects, you get some preference then around your likelihood of getting opportunities again. So it's a self-fulfilling thing. A meritocracy, I suppose, and that's exactly it. If you do a fantastic job on a couple of projects, you get to be a tier 1 supplier. You get a much higher likelihood of getting more business or more opportunities. With the ministry. So it's a kind of self-fulfilling idea. And then the bottom end of that is if you're unsatisfactory, you get less opportunities. If you have 2 strikes from the health and safety point of view, then you're stood down for a period of time.
Lawrence, I was just wondering, who does the performance assessment?
So we have internal project managers that work with the external project manager or the contractor, and that project manager sits with the contractor, so they do it together. So the project manager will fill it in, and then they sit down and they have that conversation about, you know what, you didn't do that. And that's the bit that's hard, because forcing the internal project managers to have that difficult conversation is really tough. But we're being sticklers for it, it is, it pays great dividend, but it's really difficult. Okay, I've got a couple of minutes left. There's some challenges. It's hard. Dealing with volume is hard. Evaluators always walk away because they realise that they've got 100 responses to read. So making sure they're locked in, you give yourself lots of time. I think the key probably takeaway for me in terms of the procurement is do that targeted market engagement and make sure it's not just in main centres, you go to the regions. So if you've got demand in regions, then go to those regions. Because what we found in our desktop analysis was there are very few national providers. There's only, I think, 4 or 5 providers that can cover the whole country in any way. Most could only do 1 or 2 of our regions. A couple beyond that could do 3, and we work in 10 different regions across New Zealand. Sorry, we break New Zealand into 10 regions. What are we seeing? So we got rid of the ROI, so that was easy. For 16 hours, we reckon, of internal time it was taking with evaluators and procurement people just to review ROIs. So $700,000 a year gone, and 3 to 6 weeks of a tender process gone across 300 exercises we're doing every year. Common contract clauses, so now we don't have so many tags, people know what they're playing with, they know they've got an opportunity every year to have a conversation about contract clauses, and we'll look at those tags, but then it's locked in for the next 12 months, and they kind of deal with that. Doesn't mean there's no noise, but it has cut down problems. Yep, so health and safety, it's been great, so they're motivated to do it, they know that if they have 2 strikes from a health and safety point of view, they're going to be stood down. And the past performance, this is working. So it is motivating quality outcomes. So by celebrating or rewarding good performance, we are getting improved innovation and improved outcomes. Couple more. So we published a pipeline, and anyone that's got a reasonably sized portfolio, I would suggest you do publish your pipeline. It's now incredibly easy. So the Infrastructure Commission is publishing a consolidated pipeline. So they have a web tool, and if you give them a spreadsheet, they'll put it on their website for you. So I would suggest doing it and pointing your suppliers to it. The other little bit I wanted to touch on before we run out of time is just this idea of financial due diligence. So in a market where there's quite a bit of attrition, not much working capital, and actually not a huge amount of commercial business acumen among business leaders in the majority of these companies, we wanted to get a bit more idea around our exposure from a financial due diligence from an organisational failure point of view. So we got KPMG in and basically came up with a scorecard or a dashboard for every one of our 140 entities. There's a whole bunch of ratios and metrics, which I could share at another time. But the bit I quite like is just this real simple traffic light idea. So you're bidding for a $25 million contract. That's okay. We probably would look at you. We'd have some concerns. But if you already had 2 other $25 million contracts, your aggregate gets up to $75 million, we wouldn't touch you with a barge pole, and we'd have that conversation about, you know what, guys, you've got to increase your working capital, you're too exposed. So look, this is difficult because we only know so much about how many projects they've got on at the same time. But it's started to give us a lot more insight into our risk and our exposure around organisational failure. And the next step of this now, we're leading some work, and this is part of it's a beacon project at the construction court. We're collaborating with corrections, housing, defence, us, potentially Auckland Council, around doing this together. So a common piece of software and intelligence where we put our projects in, we're looking at our exposure, and we all know what projects we've got, and we're dealing with suppliers in the same way. So the 5 of us probably make up 70% of government construction spend. So, NZTA's in there as well. So yeah, we start to gather intelligence and be a little bit informed as a government client rather than an individual client. The next bit of that for me, which I'm really excited about, is how they're performing and sharing performance information across that little collaboration as well. But that's hard. So I think that's about it. So what's interesting in here that you might want to know about? All of it's interesting. I'm done. I think that's the end. These slides will come around if people want to have a look in their own time, and I've got a couple of minutes probably for a quick question if anyone's got any. Is that all right, Greg? Good. No?
Lawrence, you talked about doing annual reviews around T's and C's of 3910.
Yeah.
Looked at EDC full contracts.
We have had a look at it. We haven't done it. I think we'll probably do a trial in the next little while, kind of a alliance trial up in Northern. So try and bundle up a bunch of projects for maybe 3-5 years, and we might look at alternative constructs then. But we haven't, and we did some market testing around it, and there wasn't a large appetite. I know there are pockets of people that love NEC3 and other contract forms, but actually the majority of the market know 3910. And once you get outside of the tier 1, tier 2 kind of contractors, I think 3910 is probably the only one that people know. So it would be quite a change to step smaller regional contractors into an alternative contract. That could be me. I think we're good. We've got to leave time for the other guys. Cheers.
Thanks, Lawrence. So yeah, linking that back to government property, you can see the benefits of collecting that project data. So as we consolidate the program this year, we will be looking for you for that data so we can get it all together. Next up we have Mio Wilson to give you a quick overview of the new construction guidelines. Mio is a commercial leader and operates out of our commercial pool here at NZGPP. Welcome, Mio.
Thank you, Greg. So, some of you may be aware that there was construction guidelines that were released October 2015. I'm here to talk about the work that was done last year to refresh those and release a second edition. Lawrence actually probably gave about half of my speech for me in terms of talking about some of the challenges in the sector, he touched on the Accord. I believe context was important also. So, a lot of those bits that Lawrence talked about in terms of the challenges, people going out of business, the fair allocation and contracts, they actually got into Lawrence's last slide and some of the challenges around different types of contracts, the ability of the market. Early on in Lawrence's presentation, he had some stuff up around skills development and training, right? So there's lots of different things you would have seen in the media that actually it's a bit of a tough time in that space. So the Construction Sector Accord, for those that aren't aware of it, was released April last year, and Transition Plan released a couple of weeks ago. It's an agreement between government and industry, or buyers and suppliers more generally, to actually work together to improve the state of the sector. The construction guidelines are a key deliverable on the government side under that. They also form a bit of a broader piece in terms of trying to improve the way that government works. So from me this morning, it's very much just a quick kind of overview of what are they, kind of what do what is the 101, kind of what do you need to know about them, and where do you find them. Absolutely opportunities to delve deeper into that on an individual agency basis if we want to. So probably from the top, what are a couple of key things you need to know about them? So the construction procurement guidelines, they're kind of a reference point. They set a standard of good practice for government agencies undertaking construction projects. They're standard of good practice, not best practice, because they're broadly applicable across a very wide range of different types of construction works, different scales, different areas, regions, maturity in terms of agencies and markets. And there's not necessarily one best way of doing a lot of this stuff, right? Many of you will recognise that you can actually do a lot of things in this space in a couple of different ways, and they all actually have their merits and they have their times when they actually make sense. So the standards of good practice, they act as that reference point. They'll be different things to different people in different agencies. Some who are experienced and have large in-house teams, like Lawrence does, will have a lot of this in hand already. But also there's agencies out there, and the example I've used in a few presentations lately is some work I did a couple of years ago for NZTE, where they've built, within the midst of building a pavilion in Dubai for Expo 2020. NZTE do not do that on a regular basis. These form a reference point for them to understand what good practice looks like, and it forms that starting point to actually get in, have that conversation, and get things moving. They don't have to start from scratch. A couple of key things that came up in developing these is that actually there is some fantastic practice out there. So government agencies are doing some really interesting work, and they're really engaged with the market and trying to really move things on from where they've potentially been in the past. And that's where I say Lawrence has probably taken half my presentation away from me just there. But
Took half your time as well.
well, there we go. The key thing here though is even those that are doing it really well, sorry Lawrence, there's still opportunities for improvement. And I think everyone would probably recognise that. There's also a consistency factor, and if you talk to the market, being asked to do effectively the same thing 5 different ways from 5 different agencies is pretty frustrating, takes a lot of time, and it's a burden on the industry. If agencies can start to introduce a bit more consistency about the way they do things, that's going to have a huge improvement on both sides. So the 2 key drivers or 2 opportunities within these guidelines is to improve the quality and to improve the consistency across government generally, and to act as that reference point for government agencies that aren't in this space day in and day out, but also to act as a reference point for those that are to help with that consistency across agencies. So what do they cover? So the guidelines from 2015, there was 5 documents that covered 5 areas. We've expanded it and we've updated it. So some of these are updated from that original version. Some of them are new, just based on how things have moved on. Things like the Construction Skills and Training Guide address specific pieces such as the broader outcomes and the priority outcomes around skills and training. Others are probably a bit broader. Developing a construction procurement strategy goes into all sorts of things about contracts, delivery models within the industry, pricing mechanisms, the works, right? So quite a bit of stuff in there. Opportunities for these to develop over time, and they will. The transition plan as part of the Accord has signalled that these will be refreshed and reviewed, and we'll be looking, or the Accord is going to be looking at how they can better serve government agencies and industry generally. So do expect some change over time as that plan rolls through. A key thing to probably note is that with that breadth of opportunities that these are applied to, and the sheer range of different types of works and different scales of project, you can't have something that applies to everybody. So there's an aware appropriate piece in here. And that's really important to be able to have agencies proactively think about actually what does good practice look like for us. But in some instances it might not make sense necessarily to do certain things. And if it's been proactively thought about and documented, and there's evidence to say, actually, we've sat down, we've looked at this, and in this instance, it doesn't make sense for us to do X, Y, or Z. If that's appropriate and it's documented, that's a fantastic. So we've got people thinking about that and actually engaging and putting that thought in ahead of time. The documenting it, it's a question I've got a couple of times recently. It can come in a range of different forms. An agency I was talking to a couple of weeks ago was looking at the piece around BIM and saying, actually, do we have to try and document something where we're not going to use it on every single project? Actually, not necessarily. There's going to be certain things that actually you look at it and say, at a policy level, at a strategy across a program. We might look at something and document how we're going to approach whole of life, how we go, what various ways you can do things. Other things that might be in a procurement plan, right? So different things will apply at different levels, and depending on the approach you're taking, you might document it in anything from a policy, a strategy, an overarching program, right down to an individual procurement and individual plan as it's appropriate. But the key part there was actually getting people to proactively engage and think through some of the things that they need to be doing in advance and understanding where they need to apply different things and why. I mentioned standards good practice, just as a very quick couple of examples. There is a range of standards of good practice set out through the documents. I'll show you where to find them in a second, but here's a couple of examples. One around matching capability and complexity. Many agencies don't necessarily have the full capability in-house that they need to deliver a project, but it's taking the time to evaluate that and understand where those knowledge gaps exist and where you need to upskill in having a planned approach to it. Equally, there's some market side of that too, and we talked about trying to get sub-trades at the moment is a bit of a challenge. Recognise standard forms of contract, Stan asked about NEC4, we talked about 3910. Those contracts exist for a reason. They're a great starting point for many discussions, and Lawrence kind of pointed out that actually once you start to get down to some of those smaller players, they are really important because that's all they know, right? So using those standard form models is really important. The risk piece around actually appropriate and fair allocation is really important too, so there's a bunch of work in there around those. And that last one is around skills development and training, right? And so if you've looked at the broader outcomes and priority outcomes, you'll recognise that flowing through from there. So these come from various sources. Many of them are common sense, many of them are just simply good practice in this space. So we've got these standards of good practice. The rules say you must apply the standards of good practice when you're doing construction works on over $9 million, but where do you find them? Within those 12 topic areas, they are scattered through the guide in those little pink boxes with the exclamation mark. They're normally located around content that will help you further understand and deliver on those standards. But there's also a summary of good practice that you can find on the website, and I'll show you the link in a second. But that summary of good practice, there's multiple stakeholders for these sorts of documents. You've got the people who are actually engaging with them and are doing the projects day in, day out. They are on the tools as such in that sense. But you also have SROs and stakeholders that really have a condensed version, something that you can trigger a conversation. You can actually kick off the working through what we need to be thinking about and doing, what does good practice look like. So if anyone's engaging with senior stakeholders, or you are a senior stakeholder, please take a look at the standards of the summary of standards of good practice. It's for that purpose. It's to enable you to kick off that conversation and really make sure that you're getting into thinking about the various areas. Each of the standards sit under those 12 topic areas. SROs, senior leaders, can look at the summary, can talk about it. The guides are there then to help people actually deliver on it. And the final little bit from me is, and where do you find them? So on the government procurement website, there's a section around specialised procurement and construction procurement. The summary, all of the 12 sections of the guides, and a whole range of information sheets, tools and templates. They're all available there on the construction procurement page on the specialised procurement. And that'll do for me, short and sharp. That's the introduction 101 level kind of information. Please dig in, take a look. And also, if you haven't looked at things like construction accord and you're working in that space, please take a look at that as well, because it's really starting to try and change the way that government and industry work together and think. So, any questions? Very good.
Thanks, Mary. Very thorough presentation. That was quick. Next, we have Chris May to give you a quick overview of Marketplace. Chris is a senior procurement specialist and from the supplier relationship management team here at NGTPP. Chris.
Good morning. The problem with going third is that a lot of the content gets covered already, and so I've actually had to cross off a lot of stuff. But no, I think it's good. If you think about it, there's a real big need coming out from government to essentially improve in this whole industry on how we engage these businesses. And if anything, it's a big picture. It's a big problem. It's good to see that there are individual agencies who are having their own approaches. So Ministry of Education definitely leading the charge with a lot of their programs and frameworks bringing forward to sort of set the standard that which other agencies need to follow. But then, there are also pieces where MD is stepping forward to try and help build the capability across government loan construction guidelines. Another piece within the whole uplifting government's capability is the marketplace, and in particular the all-government construction consultancy services contract. So for this, I've only got 5 minutes really to speak, so I'll be quick, so I'm sorry if I speak really fast. But today I'll just be covering very quickly why do we have one of these all-government contracts for this category, the marketplace itself, what's in scope, and how do I use it, as if you want to use it. So first and foremost, the need for a construction consultancy services contract was originally identified in the 2012 review for consultancy services, but I think it didn't really become pressing until the corrections panel, which previously expired towards the middle of last year. But there was definitely a need for government to try and have a simple way of engaging consultants related to the industry. That being said, though, it was a really good opportunity for us to sort of take a look at how the system works and try and make some tweaks and fixes to try and evolve the solution so that it works better for government and for businesses as well. The panel itself back then, it was fairly limited in terms of the options that it had. I think if you wanted to go for an architect, there were really only 2 that you really could go to. And in a way, it kind of hindered government's ability to sort of get the kind of businesses they wanted. And eventually what you would see is that a lot of agencies set up their own panels in a way to sort of try to curb the kind of needs that they were looking for. Also to go with that is that, apart from the people that you normally use, you didn't necessarily know who was out there inside of the market and who was good. So there's definitely a lot of information that was available out there, but there just wasn't a place to view it, or wasn't a place to see it across government, and wasn't a place to make decisions on top of it. So what we set out to do with the start of this contract was that so it's an all-government contract, which means it's a consolidated contract for the demand, for the ability to provide to government. But what we were looking for here is to use a technology platform to help connect business and government better. In particular as well, we tried to reduce barriers for small New Zealand businesses to get better visibility in front of government, as well as help provide or sort of round out the information available for government agencies so that it's a lot easier to know who out there is actually of a certain caliber that would be suitable for your project. How we did that is that we're using the marketplace. So the marketplace is a Department of Internal Affairs developed platform. And it essentially, as of today, does 3 key things which helps us in managing this large category. There is a future pipeline of functions to be deployed towards the marketplace over the next 12 to 24 months. But essentially for today, what it does is really what the core functions that we need from it being the minimum viable product. The first thing it does is that it facilitates an online RFP function. So as we know, there are hundreds, if not thousands, hundreds if not thousands of providers out there. We needed a much more streamlined way of being able to manage the panel and process all the different applications that came through and not have pages and pages of pages for evaluators to read for thousands of suppliers. Just a thing to note though, in terms of this, so the trade-off here is that in terms of our assessment criteria for this all-government contract, it's set at a minimum standard. So the minimum standard was agreed with the industry in terms of what's the minimum caliber of a consultant that one actually caliber of a consultant to be able to provide to government. And to that, so if you do go to use the panel, you obviously will need to do your own due diligence checks to see whether or not they're going to be suitable for your project. The second thing that it does is that, so once a supplier is successful, they get to be a part of this digital catalog, which essentially is a web page which lists every supplier. They have their own web page where they can put information on there to try and remove some of the common information which they have to provide as part of the RFP. So they'll put information such as, this is why you should choose us, these are the primary contact details. If you wanted, we could put our CV up there. What quality assurance accreditations do we have? Are we ISO accredited? All that stuff that's common to secondary procurement processes or to procurement processes. The idea is to have it on a website so that they only have to provide it once, and agencies can go and digest the information as and when they need them. As an agency, so if you do get to go and buy from this, how it works is essentially you get an account to log in, you view the whole catalog, and you basically, using the information on there, you can either pre-select and then either go to one or go to a couple to request a quote, or you can fill in an online form which will then publish it out to either some or all to get them to respond back. A very light form of gets, if anything. Of course, all of that is subject to whatever your internal procurement policy is. And if you, I know most of us are procurement people, but if you're not procurement people, please consult with your procurement team in the first instance. The third thing that it does is that by having a central panel or central technology platform, what it helps us is to start a picture of the data, of the engagement across New Zealand. So there's definitely a lack of visibility on what happens across the country. And if anything, just having a technology platform in the middle to sort of just know that the engagements are occurring out there helps government sort of inform those bigger decisions, such as leveling out our increasingly volatile demand curve, or help building the nationwide capability. So, so we launched the supplier application process in November last year. So suppliers have been applying since then, and we've been handling a steady stream of applications, and our assessors are mad at work processing all the applications. In preparation for an agency launch, which is looking towards to be the end of February, although that is subject to technology developments, as well as what we were looking for is this critical mass of suppliers who had been approved and had completed their web page ready, so that when we did publish, we had stock on the shelves. In terms of the scope, so what we will be launching with is up there, but I guess what's to call out here is that underneath each of these services, there's a full list of what we call sub-service disciplines, which is basically the little detail on what a consultant actually provides. So as an example, underneath architecture and design, there's basically an option where suppliers can indicate, oh, actually we are landscape architecture, or we are workplace architecture, or architectural design and build, etc. And then, so essentially, if you want to find out more information, you can go to marketplace.govt.nz. There's a lot of information on the website, but in particular, once it launches, there's a button in the top right. I'm sorry, I don't have a screenshot. It says catalog. You click that, and that'll basically get you into the marketplace to view as a public or as an anonymous user. What's next for you if you want to engage the panel is to first and foremost have a chat with your procurement teams around getting your agency signed up to the marketplace, as well as getting potentially either an account for yourself or to use somebody who has an account. Then essentially you just bring your requirements, you tell it to whoever's using the actual system, you find suppliers that you want, and you invite them to a secondary procurement process. And that's essentially it. It's an online platform to help make it easier for businesses and government to engage each other. That's my presentation. Any questions? Sorry if I spoke really fast.